Hey y'all, okay, I literally just finished watching episode 15 and this recap took me way too long to write, and I'm personally over here racking my brain as to what's going to happen next episode, especially since next week is the last episode, episode 16. And some of my theories, I was close yet also very far from what ends up happening. And now that we have some new discoveries, we've been let in on the new plan that the king has in this episode, I of course have new theories based off of what we now know, and I'll be sharing that at the end of this video after I've done the recap. So this is going to be a long one, so let's go ahead and get into what happened in this episode. The episode starts off where we left off in that scene, Egon and the detective meeting when he first crosses through the obelisk. And instead of like what happened the first time and her arresting him, she ends up embracing him for a hug this time instead of the other way around. Since we saw in the last episode, the present or future Egon has been going back into the past while he waits to catch up to the present, thus changing the future a little bit. We then see the detective in the present in the alleyway after Luna has stabbed her, and while she waits for backup to arrive, her father calls, where he tells her that he's beaten up the guys that she had called him about and the police are on the way. The detective is confused by this and asks what he's talking about since she knows she didn't call him. It seems Luna does care for her father and is the one that called him to warn him before meeting up with the detective in the alley. Now, I actually forgot about this and didn't mention it in my recap yesterday, but in episode 14, Luna does mention while stabbing the detective that her father had told her he was going to go out to patrol the area, and Luna had seen some kids who looked like hoodlums heading to where her dad was at. Now, at first, it kind of seemed like it was a threat, but it was more like, I think in a way, she was sort of telling the detective, I'm gonna look out for your father. I don't know. Now that that happened, that's kind of how I see that scene now. Meanwhile, we see Kong at the hospital where he has taken his doppelganger and he's talking with Young, who is asking for help in finding Song, now that he has that new memory of the king. Young tells Kong about how he saw her and Kong's mother at the hotel eating lunch and that he should be able to track her down from there by accessing the CCTV footage at and near the hotel from that day. Kong asks why Young had been following his mother, and of course Young doesn't tell him, but I think Kong knows why already. As he's ending his call, the burner phone rings and it's Yi-Yim telling him to meet him. We then see him meet with Yi-Yim, and this is also when we see the past events of how Kong ended up replacing his doppelganger unfold, where we see his mother trying to throw him over a bridge, and then she's most likely going to commit suicide because things are so hard she doesn't know any other way to get out of it, and Yi-Yim stops them and basically strikes a deal that puts her in the palace and Kong in the Republic of Korea, where his mother believes he's going to live an amazing life with a wealthy father. After we see this and are back in the present, Kong of course asks why Yi-Yim hasn't aged, since that's what everybody asks. And Yi-Yim doesn't tell him why he hasn't aged, but instead starts going into the fact that because he doesn't age, he thought that he had all the time that he needed to do what he was planning to do. But it seems he was wrong, and basically mentions how the Yi-Yim that had gone into the past had been right, and he should have killed the king when he was a kid in bed instead of going after the flute. So yeah, he's figured it out after killing himself. That's just freaking great, Yi-Yim. Glad you learned a lesson from that. Freaking stupid. While Yi-Yim is going into this, Kong interrupts and is like, whatever, man, I don't care about your family stuff. Why did you call me? Like, what do you need from me? And I think because he interrupted Yi-Yim, and obviously he has a past of doing this, he gets pissed and knocks Kong over the head with a piece of wood. He then pulls out the photos of Kong's mom and her doppelganger and basically threatens both of their lives if Kong doesn't do what he says, which is to get the flute piece from the king and kill him. Yim then leaves, assuming his threat is going to work and Kong is going to kill the king for him, even though Kong tells him outright he's not that nice of a son. After this, we're taken to Nari's coffee shop where we see her reading someone's palm and mentioning how the scar is crossing over his fate line, and because of that has become a new one. This is when it's revealed that it's Yim, if it's not already obvious, and he's wearing a really dorky fishing hat. Nari, obviously clueless as to who this guy is, reveals some interesting things according to his palm that she's reading. He asks what his new fate is, and Nari says she'll tell him since it's just for fun, but she reveals that his fate is to commit treason, like if we were back in the old days, that's what he would be doing, and also that he's fated to be beheaded. When she says this, he tells Nari that that already happened and he was the one that did the beheading himself. This, of course, is very strange to Nari, and this is also when Unsup shows up and at first just gets jealous that Nari is holding some guy's hand and not his. And when she explains that she's just reading his palm, he says, hey, read my palm too, so that she basically is just holding his hand, which for a second is really cute. As he's looking at Yim, he mentions that he looks really familiar, but not sure why, and slowly realizes it's Yim and that he saw him the night of the shootout when he was in the Kingdom of Korea impersonating Young. And Yim confirms this. I mean, he was there on purpose, obviously. He immediately gets Nari behind him, and this is when Yim tells him to relay a message to the king that he'd like to see him at his mother's death anniversary, and that if he doesn't show up at the memorial service, he's going to come back and kill Nari. As he leaves, Unsup is obviously freaking out and goes to call the detective, which he says out loud. And when he's fumbling for his phone, Nari's like, she's just outside. Now, it's obvious to us viewers that it's actually Luna, but Unsup doesn't know this and runs to tell her that Yim was just here. And Luna tries to pretend to be the detective, shocked that Yim was there and is like, where is he? What's going on? But when Kong arrives, she's outed since he asks her how she's there since she was supposed to be in the hospital recovering from Luna stabbing her. She tries to play this off by holding her abdomen, but forgets that she stabbed the detective on the right side, since she's right-handed and not the left, which is the side she's grabbing. And I kind of feel like she just self-sabotaged herself in doing this and meant to, but who knows. As Kong is arresting her, we see the detective show up in her hospital gown and a jacket, I assume to check on her dad and Nari since she knew Luna was still out there. And they end up taking Luna to an abandoned building somewhere where they meet up with Young. They then rifle through her bag and find the pain medication that is only prescribed to late-stage cancer patients. So it's confirmed that she has cancer, a terminal cancer, and the detective is sort of asking her, well, is that why you kept me alive? Because you need one of my organs to live? Is that your plan? Like, what's your plan, Luna? She starts interrogating her. The detective thinks that Luna actually really didn't want to kill her, either because she wants her organs or maybe for some other reason, but she asks Luna if that's the case and why when she stabbed her, that's why she purposefully missed all of her organs when she did it. She also wants to know what she talked about with her father when she was impersonating the detective, and Luna answers that they talked about food, money, work, and obviously the detective, and really that's it. As they're having a bit of a staring contest and both go to push back their hair at the same time, which you can see they're both freaking out that it's happening, time stops right then. And we see Egon has finally arrived back in the present and is looking for the detective at the police station. It's not until late that evening that they're reunited at the hospital where the detective is finally returning for treatment, since it seems that she actually left without getting discharged. While at the hospital and her and the king are snuggling in bed, we find out how the king visiting her in the past affected the present future. Not much seems to change, except that the detective believes the king quicker when he tells her about the parallel universes, and they pretty much get to spend more time with each other since she now believes him immediately. But she is still eventually kidnapped, and the events that happened before that as well as after still happen just a little sooner. While laying in bed, the king asks the detective if there's a way for them to change their fate, and the detective doesn't think so, and it's probably not easy for fate to be broken. Now, I'm not sure if this is exactly what she says since I'm reading subtitles, but she says, the larger the fate, the more you need to walk to reach your destination. I'm bringing this up since this is, I think, a big piece of foreshadowing in what's to come in the next episode. And when we find out what Egon is planning and the fact that he's going to go back in the past, I think that that's a big part of it. After the detective falls asleep, the king goes to the payphone and calls Young. When he arrives, it seems he was with Kong, and so Kong tags along. This is when both Kong and Young get confirmation that it was Egon they are looking at now that had visited them in the past. And the king confirms this, that yes, it was him. And Kong, being Kong, seems more annoyed than shocked that not only can the king cross between the universes and that they exist, but apparently he can time travel as well. Can this get crazier? Probably. Young, of course, only cares that the king is back and safe and informs him that they have found Song with the help of Detective Kong. I feel like I'm rhyming, like there's a lot of rhyming happening. When the king goes to thank Kong and that he owes him big, Kong responds with, yeah, you do owe me. You owe me a lot of things. Dinner, lunch, all the things. When the king asks how he can repay him, he says with his life, which is how he lets the king know that Yi Yim has reached out to him and what Yi Yim has asked Kong to do. When the king guesses that Yi Yim has told Kong to kill him and threatened his moms, Kong responds that he shouldn't kill him in the Republic of Korea, but he should do it in the kingdom. And his excuse being that killing him here, if he kills him in the kingdom, there will be more people to mourn his death, which seems a little nicer. So he tells the king to just let him know when he's heading back to Korea. Obviously, Kong isn't planning on killing the king, but this is his way of telling him, and then in true Kong fashion, just walks away from the conversation. After Kong leaves, Young and the king go to where his mother's doppelganger is being held. As Young tells him how she's always guarded, but she does go to church at the same time every day. It seems that's not entirely true because right then she's walking outside, either going to church or coming back from church, and Song sees them in the alleyway and recognizes the king immediately. She pretty much says to him that her son would have grown up like him if he hadn't been killed because of him. She also says that she doesn't want him to die because of her, and that if he wants to help her and save her, that he should meet up with her 2 days before the Queen's memorial service, and she knows when it is. Who knows if Yi Yim knows that she knows, but seems she has a plan as well. And this is where we start to learn what Yi Yim is planning. He's going to take the Queen's doppelganger over to the Kingdom of Korea and present her to the world during the Queen's memorial and basically tell people that another universe exists. Like, that's his plan, is to out the fact that there are parallel universes. And we do find out more about this plan, not at this point in the episode, but later on when he goes to talk with the Prime Minister. And we'll get into what happens there a little more in a bit. As Song is basically telling the king the plan, her bodyguard decides to then try and either attack the king or stop Song from telling him what happens, but Young intervenes. And I couldn't really tell, I just saw a knife coming towards them in general. She tells the king not to die because of her and not to apologize even though her son died and it's his fault. After this, we see Young and the king go back to the hospital, and Young asks when the king plans to leave so that he can escort him. He tells Young he's going to stay until the detective can take care of herself, and we get to see some really sweet romantic moments of the king taking care of the detective in the hospital. Like, super sweet. Like, why doesn't my boyfriend do that? Like drying her hair, ordering food for her and feeding her, and basically just spending some good quality time with her as she heals. During this time, we see Young saying his goodbyes to Unsup and his siblings, and doing this, we see Young picking the twins up from school, his little brother being like, hi, his little sister being like, I know it's not you, like, I know who you are. And I gotta say, Unsup trying to play it cool when Young is telling him that he's leaving, and then eventually breaking down and them just holding each other and Young promising him that he'll come back. I got a little teary-eyed during this episode. That scene with Unsup, tears. Like, I had to clean up this before shooting this. Later on, when the king and detective are sitting outside on the bench, the detective tells the king that she knows what he's planning, which is to go back in time again and try and stop Yi Yim. Because this means the detective might lose all her memories of him, she tells him not to do it, but I mean, he has to, and he promises that no matter what, he'll stop Yim and he's gonna come back no matter what, even if he has to open up all the doors to the universe. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Korea, the Prime Minister is meeting with Yim in that creepy tunnel we've seen him use before, and while there, she suggests to him that the new plan should be that she gets the king's flute, and so then her and Yim both have the flute and use it. This obviously enrages Yim, and he decides to start choking the Prime Minister, or ex-Prime Minister, and tells her that her only use now, since she isn't Prime Minister and can't be Queen, is for her to get him access to the late Queen's memorial service. And while he's choking her out, time stops, which tells Yim that the king has come back to the kingdom. We then see the king at the palace where the head court lady is waiting for him and obviously relieved that he's back and safe. He hugs her and again thanks her for everything she's done for him and keeping his secret all this time. Since he now knows she saw him in the hallway in the past and obviously didn't report him. After getting caught up with everything that has been going on in the kingdom while he was gone, his secretary informs him that the prince's son is leaving after finishing up the funeral rites for the prince, you know, who passed away because he was murdered by Yim. The king asks if he has a limp, and when this is confirmed, goes to confront him and banish him from Korea, since this confirmed it was him who helped Yim escape the palace all those years ago. I mean, he also shot his leg as proof and kept a bullet, had that still with him as evidence, so yeah. Meanwhile, Kong, who's also in the Kingdom of Korea, is meeting his real mother. He confronts her about what she did and informs her that he did not, in fact, have a good life like she thought he would, and that he's not there to forgive her, but to see her one more time, and that this time he's abandoning her. Later that evening, we see the king and Kong having drinks, and this is when Kong thanks him for letting him meet his mother, and the king telling her that she'll be safe from now on. This is also when the king tells Kong his plan to go back and stop Yim and what that entails. Apparently the reason the king failed the first time was because when he went back this last time, it was to save himself. So instead of saving himself, he's going to go for Yim while he's choking the young him and pretty much catch him off guard while he's distracted in his rage that we've seen many a time in this series. Kong is shocked by this and brings up the fact that if he doesn't save himself, doesn't that mean he'll disappear? And the king brings up that if Yim is stopped, Kong will never end up in the Republic of Korea. So Kong can't really argue with that, since that means none of the crap that's happened to him or anyone else around him will happen. So like, it's the right thing to do. He says he's telling Kong this right now because this is probably his last chance to kill him like Yim once. So if he's gonna do it, now's his chance. Kong laughs and says I should have poisoned the drinks, but you know, they're obviously joking in this moment. Kong is not gonna kill the king. They both know it, but it was just a nice little, you know, thing. This is also when Kong asks if the detective knows, and the king says she can't. After this, we see Yim in what I am assuming is the Republic of Korea, and Song is serving him some food. We see her place everything on the table and then quickly stuff some pieces in her mouth before she even sits down and before he sits down. And then she just chews and starts smiling at him as he's taking small bites of the meal. She then starts spitting up blood, and Yim quickly spits out what he's chewing because she's obviously just poisoned the food and herself purposefully. So it seems that this is what she was planning from the get-go and is hoping that she finally dies. We see Yim cough up a little blood as well, but I guess he didn't eat enough to really do any damage like she did. As they're getting an antidote into a syringe, that's when time stops, which means that the king is now in the Republic of Korea. So Yim, knowing this, takes his piece of the flute and his shotgun and I guess goes to meet up with the king while time has stopped. Yim, upset that his plan to have the confrontation in 2 days at the king's mother's memorial has been kind of shot to hell, tries to shoot the king. However, since time has stopped, the gun doesn't work, and when time does start up again, before Yim can shoot, Yong shoots him in the leg, and the king, Yong, and Kong take him to the bamboo forest and I guess try to open the obelisk. Now, here is where they discover some new information. Apparently, the flute piece will only work with the king and Yi Yim because their blood is fused in the pieces from when it got cut and when he got stabbed in the neck with it. And when I mean he, I mean the king. That's why it only works for them, because Yang tries to hold the piece to open the obelisk and nothing happens. So that means that Yi Yim has to be holding his piece as well as the king for them both to go in. Now, Yi Yim is obviously not going to willingly go into the obelisk right now. So both Yang and Kong say that they will escort him, knowing that they're probably not going to come back. Seems like the king chooses Kong to do it. During this scene, we end up seeing the king hold both the flutes and another obelisk opening up. And we find out from Yi Yim that that is the obelisk he's been looking for that opens the eternal and infinity obelisk door, because, you know, the pieces are together. He tells the king to forget about the treason and let's just go into this obelisk. The king says no, and that if the flute is together, he can't go back in time and stop him from committing treason, and he doesn't care about eternity. He just wants to set things right. We then see the king inside that said obelisk that he opened with the flute pieces, and it's either he's having an internal question, talking to himself, or maybe to the flute or God, but either way, you can tell that the decision is weighing on him, and he asks, how far do I need to go? We then see that Kong brings Yi Yim to the police station where he is held for questioning, and this is the scene that we remember and saw in episode 1. So it's coming back around, y'all. It's coming back around. So the detective is obviously at the police station, and this is when Kong tells her that they found Song dead and that she has no family. But we then also see the king at her funeral and watching her get cremated. So after the funeral, which seemed like it was the same day as his mother's memorial service, which that's a connection there and real sad, he ends up back in the Kingdom of Korea, where you see him declare that the prince's granddaughter is going to be the next in line for the throne if something were to happen to him. Now, here's where things start getting really crazy, and I think when the detective starts to figure out what the king is planning, like the full plan, because while at home, at her desk and looking at the money with the king's face on it and the photo and just be really sad, she notices that the flowers that the future Egon gave her start to dry up at a rapid pace and then die and then disappear. So I think when she sees this, she figures out what the king is planning, and perhaps it's already affecting the present, even though he hasn't gone back yet. After this, she goes to Yi Yim and asks him where the flute is or who has it, since she obviously knows the plan. And Yi Yim's response is basically like, what, you want to die too? Like, what's with you people? Why do you all want to die? The detective, of course, asks again, and I can't tell if Yi Yim actually tells her, but she does figure out that it's Kong who has the flute, and he's the one that's going to be escorting Yi Yim through the obelisk later. This whole conversation was a little weird for me, because when Yi Yim's like, why are you doing this? Why? She says she doesn't want the king to be lonely, which she thinks that the king's gonna go back in the past and be stuck there again. And so she wants to be there for him. And Yi Yim's answer is like kind of weird, because he tells her right then that he's already put Yi Yim and the prime minister through hell. And this is when we have a scene of a news story breaking that the prince's granddaughter, who the king just declared to be the next heir to the throne, is killed in a car crash by the pregnant woman that Yi Yim set up there and had her go kill the granddaughter, which we do see the pregnant woman in the car when Yi Yim comes out of the tunnel after, you know, threatening the prime minister. And obviously the prime minister sees this news, and after calling her mother and the code word not working from the last episode, realizes that he replaced her mother, i.e. killed her mother, and it's now just a doppelganger from the Republic of Korea. So she loses her shit, and that's the last we see of her through the episode. Yeah, so that whole situation, I think, was a kind of a subtitle thing where I just didn't understand what was going on. Like, he's like, why? She tells him why, and then he tells her, well, I'm putting him through hell now anyway. Like, okay, whatever. We're gonna move on. So somehow the detective knows that Kong is the one that's supposed to be taking Yi Yim through the obelisk. So the first thing she does is visits Luna, frees her, tells her to take care of her father while she's gone, and then asks her to steal something for her, where we then see Luna impersonating the detective and going into the police station. Now, I first thought that she was there to steal the flute, but actually she was getting Yi Yim out and maybe getting the flute piece as well. We don't see that. We just see her going into the police station. But later, she has Kong meet her at that warehouse and tells him that she knows he has the flute and that she has Yi Yim. So give me the flute, I'm gonna take him through the obelisk. And there's a whole thing where Kong denies this, like, flute? I don't know what you're talking about. But, you know, she's like, come on, dude, just frickin' tell me and give me the flute. And of course, Kong doesn't want her to go, eventually tells her in hopes that this will kind of sway her that he's loved her all his life, and because of that, he can't let her do this. And the detective, in tears, asks him again to give her the flute, because if he does love her, then he should know how she feels right now, and she can't be without the king. She can't abandon him right now. She needs to do this. Back in the kingdom of Korea, we see the king getting ready to put his plan into action. We see him put on his ceremonial suit and get his sword, and he then goes and says his goodbyes to the head court lady and basically kind of tells her, hey, I'm heading off again, if that's okay with you. This is also when he tells her that he knows that she's from the Republic of Korea, and tells her that he actually figured it out because she used to sing him this lullaby, and the book that he found on his first trip to the Republic of Korea had that lullaby in it. So he's pretty much known since then that that's where she's from. She asks why he never said anything, and he says it was because he was worried that if he told her he knew, that she would want to go back, and he just couldn't be without her. Meanwhile, back in the Republic of Korea, we see the detective in her car, and she's putting on the necklace the king gave her, so I guess her going back in time is the special occasion she needs to wear it. And after this, we see Kong heading to the obelisk on Maximus, and Yang showing up, pretty much telling him, you're not going anywhere without me. And they then ride into the obelisk. And I assume Yi Yim and the detective go in at the same time, since during the credit sequence, we see the king and Yang in the past going in, guns a-blazing, and shooting at the guards in 1994. And that's how they end this episode. One episode left, y'all, and wow, a lot of goodbyes in this, a lot of tears. So I do remember saying in yesterday's recap about how I wondered if the king changing his past would affect him in the present/future and maybe cause him to disappear or something. But I thought that he would still be alive, and that the detective dying was like the worst possible scenario. But now it seems like the king could just wipe himself out of existence. But the whole thing with that is that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else is going to have memories of him. I don't know, I don't know what rules they're following in regards to time travel in this series, because so far it's had a bit of like Looper or the butterfly effect. When things happen to them in their past, they suddenly get these fresh memories. But it only seems like the detective remembers what happened before and then after the king sort of came in and disrupted things. It doesn't fully seem like Kong and Yang are completely affected by it the same way. I don't know. This is I'm a little stumped. I just hope that there's a happy ending. That's all I'm hoping for right now. And there's so many ways that they could end this series. It's been a wild ride, and I don't even know what theories to share here. My main theory is obviously there's now 3 people that are going to be in the past. I feel like that's plenty of people to stop Yi Yim and save young Egon, but who knows? I mean, we still have that CCTV footage that we saw in episode 9 of the detective in the Kingdom of Korea in 2022. And that hasn't been brought up since that episode. And so because of last episode, where we see the king hanging out in the in-between to catch up to the present, I have this weird scenario in my head that they end up in the past and they do change things, but somehow the flute still gets broken in half. But like, instead of it getting Yi Yim's blood on it or the king's blood on it, it gets the detective's blood on it. Thus, she's able to control the flute, and because maybe something happens to the other piece, or maybe it's the whole flute that she now has, I don't know, but she ends up having to hang out in the in-between to catch up to the present like the king did. But of course, she's not a mathematician genius and stays in there for a little too long and winds up too far in the future. That's my only theory, just based off of that CCTV footage. I mean, it could be that all of that is erased in the whole time travel, changing the future universe. I don't know. Either way, next episode is going to involve them going into the past and attempting to stop Yim again from getting the flute. I mean, we saw that they're already doing it, but here's the thing. The king's plan was not to set off the alarms or break the glass, which is what he did last time. But literally in that last scene that we saw, we see the glass breaking. Who knows? Maybe now that Young is there, his plan sort of changes. I gotta end this video. I'm ending this video here. I think I gave some theories. I don't know. My brain is just reeling at what I witnessed in this episode, and I can't believe that the series is almost over. Okay, I'm gonna end this video with a question to you guys. For this last episode, do you guys want me to just recap it like I've been doing this entire series? Or would you guys like a reaction video? Let me know what sounds good to you, and I'll look at the comments and make a decision by next week. Also, let me know your theories. You guys have been so good and spot on about a lot of things. Like every time I read the comments, I'm like, oh, I did not think of that. That's really good. So let me know that as well if you have the time. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. I hope your head isn't hurting as much as mine is, and I'll see you next time. Bye.